What is this? Why am I talking about addiction? Why is this the center of my title for this episode? Well, I know a lot of people out there suffer from some sort of addiction, some type of addiction, some type of problem, some type of compulsive feeling, or perhaps maybe you just get really excited about something and you don't get excited about anything else. Perhaps it's just that one thing you get excited about and you don't even realize it. It's just that one thing that maybe you come home to and all of a sudden, oh, I'm gonna go play my PlayStation console. Or perhaps you're gonna go drink a beer. Or perhaps it's that fifth of vodka or whiskey or rum. Or perhaps you just want to take a line and snort up some coke or shoot up some heroin or maybe smoke some meth or do some crazy shit like that. I personally don't do any of those. So if you're thinking that I'm the type of person that does that type of shit, I don't. But, again, why is my podcast called Addiction? Well, in every sort of addiction or problem, there's always one center revolving around it. There's always something that's causing it. Usually, addiction is the same form or is the same thing, just in different forms, in different ways. So let's say you're a suffering alcoholic. Well, someone that's suffering from alcoholism, maybe the guy next to him, maybe he's a stranger, perhaps he knows him, perhaps he's known him for a very long time, is suffering from a gambling addiction or a card addiction, or perhaps he's suffering from a marijuana addiction, or perhaps the person is suffering from drug abuse. And all these addictions, they all center from one area. Like, why did this person become addicted in the first place? And then as soon as you find that center, it becomes easier and easier to overcome it. It really does. All my life, I've never, ever brought this up to anybody. For those of you that know me, for those of you that talk to me, those of you that are friends with me, know that I do not give out personal information like money. You might get some personal information out of me, but there's always more to my story, or there's always more to something else. There's always something going on in someone's life. And when someone tells you there's nothing going on, either he's lying or he just doesn't know what to say or how to say it. Anyways, I suffered from a card addiction. I suffered from blackjack. I call it the blackjack addiction. So basically, it's just like alcohol. It's just like smoking weed. Those things I am familiar with because I have smoked marijuana before. I have drank before. But for some reason, I was able to overcome it because drinking isn't the center of my life. Smoking weed isn't the center of my life. Usually when I would have a craving for alcohol or a craving for weed, I would somehow get my money away from me. And when my money is away from me, I wouldn't be able to buy it, and I wouldn't be able to get it, and then eventually soon, maybe a few hours passed by or a day passed by, I'd get over myself. It's always the first 2 days is the hardest part. So someone that may be suffering from alcoholism or drug addiction, perhaps something else that may be underlying. Like, for me, it was card addiction. I would always get that, I would get that high. I would always get that adrenaline rush every time I'd win. But then again, every time I'd lose, I'd get pissed off. And it would just build up. It would just build up. And eventually, soon I found this little way of getting around it. In this podcast, I'm going to tell you a little bit of how to get around that little addiction part, or get away from that adrenaline rush, or that feeling you get when you drink that first beer, or when you take that first hit. That's what I'm going to explain to you in this podcast, but I can't be on here for very long, because I have to go to work. Yes, I do work on top of doing this show and building my website as well. The first few hours is the hardest. It's the hardest. Usually, going to sleep is the best way of just passing hours by if you have nothing else to do. Me, this is what I do to pass the time. I figure out ways to come up with more podcasts and come up with more topics and more areas of how I can influence somebody to make themselves a better person. And as I said, the first few hours you're just gonna have to sleep it off or find something else to get you that high, which could be playing video games, or it could be drinking a beer, or it could be eating food, or going out for a drive. But if you were suffering from alcoholism, probably best you don't go out for a drive. Maybe go out for a run. That way you clear your mind, you clear your head, and just get that shit out of your system. The second day, and this is going for cigarettes too. If you smoke cigarettes, this will help you stop smoking cigarettes. It will suck, but this is a good treatment plan to stop doing it. The second day, it's also going to be hard. You're going to crave it, you're going to crave it, and you're going to crave it. But if you think about the first day, you think about, okay, how can I overcome this? Well, if you're having the feeling of needing alcohol, or needing a cigarette, or perhaps you want to go play cards, or do whatever, sleep it off. Sleep it off, or find something else to entertain yourself with. If you're not playing computers, go play a computer. If you're not playing a video game, or you're not on the PC, if you're not on the console, like a PlayStation or an Xbox, go out and go play one. Third day, it's not going to be as hard as the first 2 days, but it will be easier to overcome. And as soon as you pass the third day, the fourth day, the fifth day, the sixth day is going to be so much easier. But there's always chances of relapsing. And you relapse. People say not to be hard on yourself, but if you're not hard on yourself, you're not gonna get past it. But don't be too hard on yourself, though. Just think about how many days you went by sober and use it to do it again. And then keep doing it. And keep doing it until you're no longer having that feeling of like, oh shit, I need to go do that same thing over and over again, even though it's causing me to, or causing you to have all these issues. But it will stop eventually. And a lot of times I see these Facebook pages, or I see these messages that people try to post. I know they're full of shit too, because people like you, me, it works for some people, but people like you and me, though, perhaps you're single, you don't have anybody else to rely on, you don't have friends, you don't have family, you don't have anybody else. What do you do? What do you do when you don't when you can't rely on anybody else? Well, I will tell you, but I'm not going to tell you in this podcast. This podcast is about addiction and how to stop addiction. So, in the next podcast, I'm going to talk about how to, or what do you do when you can't rely on people. Like I said, I've seen Facebook messages, I've seen messages through people like, hey, maybe 4 or 5 years ago or 6 years ago, I had a kid, or I did this, I made a lot of money, so I no longer have to worry about financial problems, or perhaps that person is not handling their financial problems anymore. Perhaps their significant other, who's more responsible, is taking over their financial prerogatives, and that's how they overcame their addiction. That's another good way too. So, if you have a significant other and you have an uncontrollable addiction, that would be the first person to turn to. Make them take away everything, or hand them everything, your debit cards, your credit cards, your alcohol, your cigarettes, your weed, all that shit. And eventually soon, you will stop asking. You will stop buying it. Because in your mindset, you know that you're not allowed to have it. So, next podcast is, what do you do when you can't rely on someone else? And yeah, that's going to be the next podcast. Well, thank you for listening to me this morning. I thought this was going to be a quick 5-minute podcast, but I can go on and on and on with stories about people with addictions, because I've seen it. I've seen what happened. I've seen what happens to people. I've seen their financial instability. I've seen people just go in jail and never come out because shit just keeps instigating and keeps escalating, and it just never ends. So stay tuned for more.